Yes, disappointment. I mean, who enjoys disappointment? Nobody I know, considering it is the exact opposite of enjoyment. Phil Heath, he must have felt more disappointment than any other bodybuilder in 2018 when they announced Sean Roden as the winner. Wow, wow. But in this video, we are going to take a look at, we'll say, 6 bodybuilders that have had the most disappointing careers in all of bodybuilding. So considering both of these guys are former Mr. Olympia champions, they definitely do not meet the criteria. Now, what about Kai Green? He placed second time and time again at the Mr. Olympia event. Well, if you ask me, placing second at the biggest bodybuilding show in the world is quite a prestige, and considering Kai Green also is a multiple Arnold Classic champion, he definitely does not deserve to be on this list. So don't look for Cedric McMillan to be on the list, but other than that Arnold Classic win, McMillan is exactly what I am looking for in this video. A guy that had the potential to go all the way, but never even managed to get into that top 3 placing at the Olympia. And this guy here, we will begin with Gary Stridem. This guy had it all. Size, aesthetics, muscularity, proportions, and might I add, not a bad looking fellow whatsoever. And I'm sure that doesn't mean a whole heck of a lot to most of you guys, but probably does to the IFBB, considering he would have been a very marketable man. I mean, look at this guy. Looks like Superman. So what happened to Gary Stridem? He had the potential to win the Mr. Olympia event. Why is it that he only ever placed 5th at the Olympia? And that was in 1988. Well, he was a young man then. He was an up-and-comer, and his best years were far ahead of him, considering that Lee Haney was not far away from retirement. Gary Stridem probably should have won at least a few Mr. Olympia events. Well, he went to the WBF. It was Vince McMahon's answer to the IFBB at the time, and he threw truckloads of money at these guys. He offered them so much money, even Dorian Yates included, which he did not take the offer. And Gary Stridem did, and Joe Weider, he made it that you did compete in that WBF, or you did go to the WBF from the IFBB, you were banned for life from the IFBB. So it only lasted 2 years. He was the champion, of course, in the WBF. Great physique, but then nothing. Nothing. Very disappointing. In fact, maybe one of the most disappointing careers in the IFBB. I guess they released the lifetime ban, and Gary actually returned 2006, I believe. But I mean, he was too old to do anything about it by then. But it definitely goes to show us that he had the genetic longevity, so he could have very well been a multiple-time Mr. Olympia champion. The next guy we are going to look at, little bit of a different flavor. This is Victor Richards. And why is he so different? Not only did he not place in the top 3 at the Olympia, he never competed in the Olympia. He was never even a pro. Victor Richards, he gets a pass though because he was so phenomenal. He did compete when he was a teenager, for goodness sakes. Look at this. He had outstanding results on the bodybuilding stage. But then he quit, well, competitive bodybuilding anyway. He continued on competing with himself, I guess. Look at this. This was a top-tier bodybuilder that wasn't even stepping foot on the bodybuilding stage. It was so disappointing to his fans. Victor Richards, I mean, my soul. Why would he be so gosh darn huge and impressive if he wasn't going to compete? Well, I'm sure if you ask him, the answer would be very confusing indeed. But the fact that he was actually doing guest posings beside, get this, Dorian Yates, the Olympia champion, the guy that was bigger than anybody, Victor Richards was going on stage and guest posings and just showing the man who the real man was. I mean, this guy was a legit contender for the Olympia crown. Didn't even compete. How disappointing is that? And he had a real presence on that stage. You know, he'd show Dorian, look who the man is, buddy boy. So the guy definitely, in my opinion, without a shadow of a doubt, had the potential to be a multiple-time Mr. Olympia champion. And the fact that he didn't even compete once for this crown is the most disappointing fact of all. The next gentleman on this list needs no introduction, I am sure, to any of you people. This is Lou Ferrigno. He competed back in the 1970s, and we are going to bend the rules just slightly here for Lou, but hear me out. Lou, back in 1974, he was placing second to Arnold Schwarzenegger at the Olympia event. Now, second, not supposed to be on the list, right? Well, there was only 2 competitors, so Lou was also placing dead last. He placed third in 75 also, which was dead last. So, very disappointing. And here's where it gets even more disappointing. Lou quit bodybuilding. He went to do movies, playing such legendary characters as Hercules of Thieves. Hey, I believe that Hercules was real. Hey, if you're allowed to believe in the other guy, I can believe in Hercules, right? But anyway, he most notably played the Incredible Hulk. And this was in his bodybuilding prime. He competed when he was in his early to mid-20s and then quit. That's his best time, right? And then he went and returned to bodybuilding in his 40s. So, I mean, as far as a bodybuilding fan, what a disappointment. But I mean, food for thought. He is much more noted for his playing the Incredible Hulk, and I'm sure much more rich and famous than any other bodybuilder at that time, aside from, Arnold Schwarzenegger. And to put a final explanation point on this disappointment, Lou couldn't even win the Masters Olympia, which was seemingly made for Lou in 1994, but he couldn't even win that, making an extra little bit of a disappointment in the career of one Louis Ferrigno. The next guy we're going to look at, much like everybody else we've seen, had it all. I mean, size, muscularity, even good looks. This was Bertil Fox. Brutal Bertil Fox. And this guy was so gosh darned impressive. I mean, even today's day and age just boggles the mind to look at some of these pictures of brutal Bertil Fox. Not only that, guys, but he had the endorsement of none other than the Austrian oak, Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, they were working out together. Arnold was saying, he's the next big thing, or what does he say here? I think he is the new bodybuilder. He is the big time of the day. So anyway, he got the endorsement of Arnold Schwarzenegger. So why didn't he win the Olympia? Well, in 1983, he very well could have. And this was, I think, what started the downfall of brutal Bertil Fox. He placed 5th in an event where he could have easily won. And if you ask any of the audience members, I am sure they would tell you brutal Bertil Fox was the 1983 champion. Because, I mean, you watch the video footage and you can hear the audience. They were so upset with the announcement of the 5th place finish. And after this, Bertil Fox just really didn't give a darn about bodybuilding. He pretty much knew, with politics, he was never going to win the Mr. Olympia event, and by 1987, he had plummeted all the way down to 12th place. He did continue on to compete up until the 1990s, which was pretty impressive, really, considering he competed as far back as the 1960s, which again showed that he did have the longevity genetic-wise, and he could have been easily a multiple-time Mr. Olympia champion, but at the end of the day, never even placed into the top 4 at the Mr. Olympia event. And with only 2 other bodybuilders being featured on this video, I am sure most of you realized that Gunther Schlierkamp was going to be one of these disappointments. This guy had it all. I mean, from good looks to size, muscularity, and talk about marketability. He looked like Arnold Schwarzenegger, for goodness sakes. Gunther Schlierkamp seemingly had it all. He even nailed it one year at the Mr. Olympia event, where the champion came in off in 2002. And if you talk to any of the fans, even a lot of reputable people in the bodybuilding field, I'm sure a lot of them would tell you Gunther Schlierkamp should have won the 2002 Mr. Olympia event, but he didn't. In fact, he placed 5th. Can you imagine that one? And if you watch the video footage of them announcing the 5th place finish for Gunther, you can hear the audience members. They are so upset, maybe even more upset than when they announced Bertil Fox 5th in 1983. But anyway, Gunther Schlierkamp, he did continue on to compete at the Olympia. He actually got a 4th place finish at one point. But I mean, he never really had that 2002 pop or wow. I really honestly think, just like a lot of the other gentlemen, he knew he was never going to defeat the champion, politics, whatever, what have you, and he really stopped trying. But let's face it, guys, there was a time Gunther Schlierkamp, if he had have took that title, he definitely would have maintained it, and who knows how many times he would have became or held on to that Mr. Olympia title. And now, the final disappointment. And I'm sure some of you guys knew this dude was coming. He had perhaps, this is Paul Dillette, by the way, Canadian bodybuilder, Paul Dillette. He had perhaps the best genetics of all time, maybe the best shot at being a multiple-time Mr. Olympia champion. Paul Dillette. I mean, he had height, size, aesthetics. He had, little goodies like massive calves, an incredible waistline. And the guy came in conditioned. This is 90s conditioning. Glutes, hamstrings, look at that. And for a guy not known for his back development, I must say, take a look at this shot here, and he definitely had possibilities. Look at those traps and the Christmas tree. Come on. Paul Dillette was the worst guy to stand next to. Look at him next to Flex Wheeler, a guy known for his aesthetics and incredible waistline. Look at Paul, guys. He is making Flex Wheeler look like an amateur. My soul, Paul was incredibly good. He climbed all the way to 4th place in 1994. He was seemingly getting better and better. I mean, look at this guy. Just incredible. So what happened to Paul? What happened? Was it politics? No. To put it bluntly, he could not pose. He would seemingly get exhausted, and sometimes he would even cramp up. His back was all cramped up, and oh my goodness, it looked like something was popping out of his belly. Look at Thierry Pastel in the background. I think he is scared, and he should have been. Paul, he went into convulsions, it looked like. I guarantee you, that guy there, you can see holding his leg, he thought he was handling a corpse. But little did he know, Paul was actually pregnant with an alien baby, and they brought him backstage, and luckily there was a guy back there who knew a little something about that, and he gave birth to a brand new, healthy alien baby boy, 23 pounds, 6 ounces. 1998 at the Olympia. Basically, same thing happened. No alien this time, but he went into convulsions. He passed out on stage, just totally cramped up. Ruining his chances once again for winning a Mr. Olympia title. Like a trooper, he continued on to compete, well into the 2000s, but I mean, he was a shell of his former self. But let us not forget, at one time, Paul Dillette, perhaps the best chances of being the greatest bodybuilder that the world had ever seen. I'm talking bigger and better than Ronnie Coleman would ever even dream of being. This guy could have been. But it was never meant to be, guys. Hit thumbs up on the video. I really hope you enjoyed this one. All of these guys were incredible and had a great potential to be a Mr. Olympia champion. And they were still, you know, some of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. Subscribe to the channel. Have a great one.